Hello and welcome to Searching for Service, a show designed to help current and future Rotarians find purpose through service. Our show's promise is a dedication to sharing stories, experiences, and opportunities for those searching for service, and how Rotary has been the organization to bring it together. The goal of the show is to grow the Rotary family by connecting through service projects. I'm Kelly Kirk, and with me
is Joseph Kirk.
Together, we're going to deep dive into the heart of Rotary, service above self. And we do have an incredible guest on with us today, Brian Rusch, who is the Vice Chair of DEI Task Force for Rotary International. And Brian, you are coming live to us from Spain?
Spain, right?
Barcelona, yeah.
Barcelona, look at that. Welcome, and thank you for taking time out of your day and your travels to hop on this show and this podcast with us. We're so happy to have you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you guys for inviting me.
You're welcome. And so let's dive in. Let's dive into you, Brian, and why don't you start off by sharing with our listeners a little bit about yourself, and we'll go from there.
Sure. So, my name is Brian Rusch. I am a member. I'm the vice chair of the Rotary International DEI Task Force. I kind of have been involved with Rotary for a really long time. My grandfather was a Rotarian, and I got super involved assisting him. I was a Rotary Youth Exchange student to Brazil. I joined the first club, the Rotary Club for Hollywood, when I was 25. And then I got out of Rotary for a little while because it wasn't really, I didn't feel like I belonged very well. And then I kind of rejoined probably 15 years ago.
Okay.
And then professionally, I work a lot through nonprofit work, do a lot of humanitarian work, primarily with the Nobel Peace Laureates.
Wonderful. So you had your start with Rotary in Hollywood, correct?
I did.
Okay, yeah, excellent.
Rotary Club
and
Hollywood.
I think that we'll end up circling back to how you did not feel much of that inclusion here at some point. But one of the things that I also noted on your website is that you were a successful fashion stylist there in Hollywood too. And
I was.
As somebody who loves fashion, I have to talk about that for just a brief moment.
You have a new lifelong friend, by the
way. I got into my grandfather and my father really wanted me to go into business, and I didn't know. I was getting a business degree, and then I really didn't know what business I wanted to go into, and then I discovered a fashion school that focused on business of fashion in Los Angeles, and so I went there and also started working as a assistant fashion stylist originally, and then I started working with a magazine and got into fashion styling and mostly did primarily music videos and a lot of magazine work, some album packaging, mostly rock stars and pop stars.
Sounds so cool.
Yeah, I was just going to say, seems really boring and just kind of ho-hum, clocking in 9 to 5.
It's funny. When I got into nonprofit work, I really people are like, how did you go from that to that? And it's the same skill set, right? It's just now I'm just using those powers for good. And
That's so good. So I do want to pose the question then, in having done that and then made that transition, what are the things that you did take from being a fashion stylist and how it kind of shaped who you are and where you're at now?
I think the greatest thing that I've been able to have, there's several things. The first thing, as a stylist, I worked with a lot of really famous people. And at first you're super intimidated, right? But then you kind of realize that we're all the same. Mm-hmm. And I think when you realize that, it really helps you to kind of thrive no matter what kind of field you go into afterwards, right? So I, went from working with boy bands and rock stars to then the Dalai Lama. And it really was like not as intimidating as it would have been maybe if I hadn't had that journey beforehand. And it really has allowed me also, I think, to thrive within Rotary because I'm able to sort of like see how I can connect dots on how things might benefit other people. And so it's like, oh, okay, here's how Rotary might help elevate the message of a certain luminary. And here's how these luminaries can elevate Rotary International on a global stage, and much of what I do is on the global level of the Rotary. So that's sort of how I've really strived to do that work.
Well, you've had a unique background, not only working with famous people, but also, Nobel Peace Prize, Nobel laureates like Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama, which both, I'm sure that they can party like rock stars too, but but when they're not partying like rock stars, they're saving the world. So, talk a little bit about, there was something that actually caught my eye on your bio as well, is that you really embody the African concept of, is it Ubuntu?
Ubuntu, yeah.
Yeah. And for our listeners, can you remind us what that is?
Sure. So Ubuntu is a South African philosophy that loosely translates to "I am because you are," and so my humanity is tied up. It's inextricably bound to yours, and all of us can only be human together. And that was something I first learned from Archbishop Tutu, and it was it sort of goes along those lines of realizing that we're all just people trying to make it in the world at the end of the day, right? And we need each other to do that. And it's really how we're able to go through it. And we all have different skill sets, and it's being able to really recognize what those are, put them together to help all of us make it through our daily lives.
If you had to narrow it down to the 2 or 3 most important lessons you've learned from not only your fashion design background, but also, in working with these, ultimately gigantic personalities and people, like, what are the 2 or 3 concepts that you really learned from it?
I think first off, there's we are constantly feeling like we have to be doing a certain thing and behaving a certain way. And one of the things I really learned through working with Archbishop Tutu was that he arrived as his authentic self. And when he was going through a lot of the troubles and travails that during the apartheid era, he was the Archbishop of Cape Town. And at the time, they didn't actually allow Black people to stay the night within the city limits of Cape Town, but the residency for the Archbishop was in the city limits of Cape Town, and so he did, and it actually caused a lot of drama. And I think that arriving authentically to what you're doing, no matter what that is, and not focusing on what you know or what you feel to be right, and maybe sometimes it's not always right, but it's in that moment you feel that you're doing the right thing. I think that was one of the most important things. And it's something that both His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Tutu did over and over and over again. I think the second thing is really to not take yourself too seriously. And I know I have a new Instagram fan. But I think that, like, knowing, don't get caught up in the drama of what people think you are. Just enjoy your life and enjoy yourself and enjoy the people around you, and try and take that joy with you no matter what you're doing. And as a third thing, I think that it really does come back to that thing that at the end of the day, we're all, there's 8 billion of us on this planet, right? And we're all just trying to, like, do our best and get through the day. But none of us are any different. Some of us have more benefits, more privilege than others of us. But at the end of the day, all of us matter. And to be able to work with the Dalai Lama or be working with, a disabled person in Delhi, both of them deserve the same amount of respect and the same amount of energy that I'm able to give in that moment.
That's really fantastic. And,
I'm that's so good.
Pretty much a perfect segue into what we're going to be getting into in our second segment here. We've got about a minute left here, where we're going to be talking about your work with Rotary International and the diversity and inclusion committees. And first of all, what that is, and then how that's impacting Rotary as a whole, how that's impacting what you're doing in the nonprofit world, how that impacts, how you treat people and how you approach people on a daily basis. So we're really excited to hear a little bit more about that here coming up in our next segment. But let's
wrap it up
and go into the section 2.
And as a reminder, you are listening to Searching for Service, brought to you by Rotary District 5950 and 5960. I'm Kelly Kirk.
And I'm Joseph Kirk. Excited to see you on the next side of the break. Rotary is a place for all community-minded people who want to serve their areas with the support of an international organization. Join Rotary to find service. Join Rotary to find inclusion. Join Rotary to find leadership. Join Rotary to find fun. Join Rotary to find friendship. Join Rotary to find a better version of the world. Find a Rotary Club near you at Rotary.org and click on Club Finder. There is a club out there for everyone. Find your fit with Rotary. Rotary.org.
For decades, eradicating polio worldwide has been Rotary's cornerstone cause. We are incredibly close to ridding the globe of this virus, but we need everyone's help to get us to the goal. World Polio Day is October 24th. Please consider making a new donation to Polio Plus or increasing your already generous giving. Go to endpolio.org to be a part of this historical eradication of polio. You will help get vaccinations to the most remote parts of our world and help fulfill a promise we made to end polio now. 2 drops, and it stops.
Don't miss Leonard Skinner, Darius Rucker, REO Speedwagon, and Tyler Hubbard at Lakefront Music Fest, July 14th and 15th at Lakefront Park in Prior Lake. Leonard Skinner headlines July 14th with REO Speedwagon and Blackstone Cherry. Darius Rucker headlines July 15th with Tyler Hubbard of Florida Georgia Line and Joe Nichols. Tickets available at lakefrontmusicfest.com. That's lakefrontmusicfest.com. Produced by Prior Lake Rotary.
Riverbend Nature Center is a free, nonprofit natural habitat in Faribault, Minnesota, with 743 acres, the Straight River, and 10 miles of trails. Despite no public funding, it offers educational programs to almost 10,000 youth and families annually. Riverbend seeks your feedback on its new strategic plan at rbnc.org/strategic-planning by March 30th. Thank you for your time.
Hello and welcome back to Searching for Service, brought to you by District 5950 and 5960. That is Rotary District 5950 and 5960. I'm Kelly Kirk.
And I'm our co-host, Joseph Kirk.
And as a reminder, you can find us on your favorite podcast platforms, and we love
5-star reviews, as many as we can.
Take it away, Joseph Kirk.
All right, Brian, we're going to just, thank you so much for sharing a little bit about yourself, first of all. What a fun background, and I wish we had an hour to just talk about your background because it's so cool. Like, we're just sitting here like super fans, like, oh my gosh, you're just constantly around people that either I admire or, wish I could party with.
It's awesome.
But let's pivot over into Rotary. I mean, we wouldn't be
doing this show without having
Rotary
that as our background.
So first of all, talk a little bit more about your role within Rotary, how you got started, and then let's just very quickly go into DEI and why it's been an important component for Rotary International, and then all the way down to the club level.
Okay, so my grandfather was a Rotarian, and so growing up, he was the president of the local Rotary Club in my town of like 300 people, and we did pancake breakfasts, and it was like what a lot of people imagine Rotary to be like still, and it is in a lot of places, which is awesome. And through that, my high school, which was very small, my class was only 60 people, but we always had exchange students, and so I had the opportunity to be a youth exchange student to Brazil because of Rotary, and I would say it's one of the top 3 things that impacted my life the most as far as the person I am today, because it really gave me an expanded worldview of what Rotary, what the world was. And it was all thanks to Rotary. and to be able to have that experience and interact with people from all over the world, but also live in a country that was totally different. I lived in this massive city of almost 4 million people, where, from a town of 300, that's a big difference. And I grew up in Colorado. It was at the beach in Brazil, so it was definitely different.
From mountains to beaches, love it.
And so I moved to LA to get into fashion in my early 20s, and I launched my first company, and I decided that maybe there was a potential to do something with Rotary through that. And so I joined the Rotary Club for Hollywood, which at the time was by far one of the most progressive clubs I'd ever been to. This was mid 90s, and it was pretty even. There was a lot of women in that club, which was not normal. But I was 25 at the time, and I was by far the youngest person by more than 15 years. And so it was a great experience because I was able to interact. The dean of Hollywood High School was a member, and I was able to really elevate my professional side with a lot of the stuff that was happening in Rotary and combine those two things to do great things. And then when I left LA, I visited a lot of other clubs, originally in Oregon and then in Northern California, and I just wasn't finding a club that I connected with. It was just, I'm not a super traditional person, and so
you
really
wouldn't say.
And then I actually had a good friend who worked at Rotary, he was staff at RI, and he invited me to visit this club that was about to charter, which was Rotary Club for Castro, which was the first LGBTQ culture club, and it was in the Castro neighborhood of San Francisco. And so it took us about a year, and we chartered that club. And it was interesting because at the time people were like, why do we need a club like this? It's a very specific kind of niche thing. And we weren't doing a lot of cause-based clubs or anything like that at the time. But that club stood as a model that Rotary really was evolving, that it was becoming something so much more than my grandfather's Rotary Club, right? And that it was really, there were opportunities within the organization for all of us. And that was the Rotary that I knew and that I wanted to be part of. And so I was part of that. And then I helped to charter a second club. And then I chartered a third club during COVID, which was an e-club. And that was really focused on removing obstacles to being a Rotarian. And how can we really help, people of different economic backgrounds, people that live in countries where Rotary maybe can't have a physical presence, women who might live in regions where they still have men-only clubs. How could we really be a club that was open to all of these people? And so that was how I got involved with that work. The DEI stuff really came about. I was invited to speak at the District 5000 conference in Hawaii, and Jennifer Jones was the president's rep at that event. And so I was speaking on peace and my work, what I'd learned from working with peace leaders and how I could really apply that, how we all could apply that to our lives. And afterwards, first of all, I was super stressed because all of us at this point have seen Jennifer speak, but she nails it every single time, right? And so she's on stage right before me. And so I'm like panicked.
You're like, how do I follow this?
It reminds me of this scene from it's the Johnny Cash when we walk the line. He goes, nobody follows, or what does he say? Like it's Jerry Lewis that comes off. He goes, nobody follows a killer.
Yeah.
And that was what it was like, right? Because she talks and just everybody falls in love with her instantly. And so I got up there and I talked about my work with the laureates, and I was also very open and honest about, my relationship. My husband and I have been together for 28 years last week or a week ago, 2 weeks ago.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah. But it was just sort of like, not like a gay rights thing or talking about LGBTQ rights, but it was more just like talking about my life in a casual, common way. And afterwards, Jen came up to me and she just was like, you need to talk about this more to Rotary. And she invited me to the International Assembly to speak. And I gave a version of that talk called Coming Out into My Own Legacy. And it was really about my work with these amazing individuals and how I use that work now and how it really feeds me to go and do the work that I'm doing today. So that's really how I originally got into all this work.
Well, and if I might make a comment, is you want to talk about having about as good of a background and experience in coming at a very difficult conversation, right? Within an organization that has been historically, good
old boys club.
Good old boys club. And it probably just equipped you from this place of understanding and inclusion and this, we're all the same and we all just need our place. And if we don't have a place, let's make it. Like, when you were talking about the formations of the clubs that you had helped, it was, hey, we don't really have a place. Let's make one. And then Rotary was at least smart enough to know at that point, like, wow, this is something.
We need to embrace us.
And,
go
ahead. Well,
I think that, I do, because, I work with His Holiness and Archbishop Tutu, and then I also, I've done projects for Pope Francis, and I think that allowed, in some way it allowed me to maybe have a voice that most people wouldn't have in the organization, and with that there was a lot of privilege, right? And so I had to use that privilege for something that I felt was important in the organization, and so that's really how I kind of got into that, because it's harder. I show up as my big gay self to events, and if I didn't have that background, I wouldn't be able to do the things that I do.
Right.
I'm conscious of that. And so I think that I have to use that to really make an impact and make change, and that's what I'm trying to do.
And I think that's so amazing. And I want to point out one other thing that is a commonality among Rotary, or among like all the guests that we've had, all the Rotarians, is you have to be careful what you say around who you say, because they will give you a platform. Like you follow Jennifer Jones, and then boom, there's the platform.
And there's your platform. Yeah, for sure. Something else that I do want to say too is that each one of the guests that we have had on has authentically just been themselves, and within doing so, something really magical and beautiful has happened from that, whether it's, Sue with the Alzheimer's Foundation, or in this case, Brian, with all that you're doing with the DEI task force. So we have literally another minute left in this section. I can't believe how quickly it's flying by. And so I think for our next section, we'll just continue the conversation, because we could just keep going for a very, very long time. So.
Well, and one other thing, we do have a couple of seconds, is I cannot believe the commonality of how important the youth exchange has been with every single person that we've had on the show. Is youth exchange is kind of that catalyst that's, either exposed them to something or they've had a student. It's pretty phenomenal. So I loved hearing that you said that the exchange program really impacted you.
It's an amazing program. It really is.
All right. Thank you so much for tuning in to Searching for Service. We're not wrapped up yet. As a reminder, we're brought to you by Rotary District 5950 and 5960. I'm Kelly Kirk.
And I'm Joseph Kirk. We'll see you in the next segment, whatever it is.
Riverbend Nature Center is a free, nonprofit natural habitat in Faribault, Minnesota, with 743 acres, the Straight River, and 10 miles of trails. Despite no public funding, it offers educational programs to almost 10,000 youth and families annually. Riverbend seeks your feedback on its new strategic plan at rbnc.org/strategic-planning by March 30th. Thank you for your time.
Don't miss Leonard Skinner, Darius Rucker, REO Speedwagon, and Tyler Hubbard at Lakefront Music Fest, July 14th and 15th at Lakefront Park in Prior Lake. Leonard Skinner headlines July 14th with REO Speedwagon and Blackstone Cherry. Darius Rucker headlines July 15th with Tyler Hubbard of Florida Georgia Line and Joe Nichols. Tickets available at lakefrontmusicfest.com. That's lakefrontmusicfest.com. Produced by Prior Lake Rotary.
For decades, eradicating polio worldwide has been Rotary's cornerstone cause. We are incredibly close to ridding the globe of this virus, but we need everyone's help to get us to the goal. World Polio Day is October 24th. Please consider making a new donation to Polio Plus or increasing your already generous giving. Go to endpolio.org to be a part of this historical eradication of polio. You will help get vaccinations to the most remote parts of our world and help fulfill a promise we made to end polio now. 2 drops and it stops.
Rotary is a place for all community-minded people who want to serve their areas with the support of an international organization. Join Rotary to find service. Join Rotary to find inclusion. Join Rotary to find leadership. Join Rotary to find fun. Join Rotary to find friendship. Join Rotary to find a better version of the world. Find a Rotary Club near you at Rotary.org and click on Club Finder. There is a club out there for everyone. Find your fit with Rotary. Rotary.org.
Hello and welcome back to Searching for Service, brought to you by Rotary District 5950 and 5960. I'm Kelly Kirk.
And I'm Joseph Kirk.
And as a reminder, you can find us on your favorite podcast platform. And Joseph, we love
5-star review.
It's just like it rolls off the tongue.
It really does.
If you're tuning in for the first time, we have special guest Brian Rusch. He is the vice chair of the DEI task force for Rotary International. And if you have missed the last couple of sections, please do yourself a favor and go back, start it over, and just listen through, because Brian is incredible. We are super fans already. Instagram fans too. So, but in our last section, we really started to dive into your involvement in Rotary International, DEI, and all that encompasses that. And so we're just going to continue through
that
where
conversation.
we left off.
Yeah, cool. I think it's just time to let's talk about, what is the task force really focused on? What are the hopes and aspirations that we have for our local clubs? Just take it from there.
I think that the task force started. President Holger started the task force and invited me to be part of that during that first his first couple months during COVID, and we were tasked with a few things. It was, first of all, to gauge where Rotary is with DEI around the world. Not just what are we doing in our clubs, but where are we? And it's an important thing to look at, because what challenges we have, for example, in Minnesota or in California, are going to be very different than what the challenges we have in South Africa or in India. And so it really was about, how can we look at that? How can we improve that? And at the end of the day, for me, I think it's very much, how to create clubs that are welcoming to people. How do we make sure that, like, when somebody comes through that door, they feel like there's a sense of that they're welcome. And, it's interesting, because I know that there's a lot of pushback on this in certain regions, a lot in North America. And I think that if we look at it really from that viewpoint, like, how are we making sure that our clubs are welcoming to people, it makes it much more difficult to really not be on board with, right? Mm-hmm. I think that, one of the things that we've also discovered lately is there's some problems with the word equity. And equity is one of those terms that became sort of a hot flashpoint, talking point for people. And that, why should this person get more than I do? And I think, when I talk about equity, I really like to look at money, because we all understand money, right?
Yeah.
And in San Francisco, the median income is $80,000 a year. In Minneapolis, it's like $35,500 a year. In Delhi, it's about $3,000 a year. And in Lagos, Nigeria, it's $900 a year, right? But to be a Rotarian in any of those regions, it costs $70, $75 a month or a year to be a member of Rotary, no matter which one of those regions you live in. And so when we look at it through that lens, is that fair to all concerned? I don't think so.
That's fascinating context. I would never think of it like that, that the cost is the same.
Yeah.
No matter where you are.
And so what that means then is that we end up with Rotarians in certain regions of the world who are very, very, very wealthy, but aren't really we're excluding a whole group of people that might make amazing Rotarians. In my work through the nonprofit world, I work with so many people that are doing amazing work on the ground, but they're not making the kind of money. One of my club members who we sponsor to be in our club, he makes $200 a month. Our dues are $200 a year, which is low for Rotary. And, there's no way he could afford to pay $200 a month or $200 a year if he was trying to join a club. It just wouldn't be possible. And yet, during COVID, for example, all of our we have like at the time we had 4 sponsor members, we have 6 now. All of our major international projects that we did that year, which were massive, were led by our sponsored members who are on the ground doing this amazing work. And so it really is, how are we making the organization accessible to everybody? And it's about more, it includes race, it includes gender, it includes LGBTQ people, but it's about so much more than that. How are we making sure that, when we're meeting in a lunch club, that somebody who might be in a wheelchair or not super mobile can actually get into that? If we're meeting on Zoom, are we making these accessible to people with hearing impairments? A great thing for you all, you're doing this live stream to Facebook. Do you have this conversation so that people can actually read it, so that they can actually watch the show rather than going online and having to listen to it because they can't listen to it? There's so many great things that we can be doing that are more inclusive to people that again, people that are going to make amazing Rotarians.
One of the things that you just said, I think, is something that always strikes me is we I think, for most part, as people, have a misconception of what diversity means.
Yes.
Diversity can mean skin color, diversity, but thought, religion. I mean, it's everything. Yeah. And diversity isn't...
It doesn't solely fall into those categories, and I think that we kind of pigeonhole ourselves into these specific categories versus what you were just sharing, Brian, that there's so much more to it, and Rotary has been doing what they feel is the best that they can do to try to incorporate the other components of what we think is diversity as well.
But I think I think you also boiled down what DEI is actually intended to do. Mm-hmm. And it's to make people feel welcome, period, right? And that way, if we're creating environments, if we're creating opportunities, whether it's Rotary or whether it's not, I mean, our listeners are both Rotarians and non-Rotarians, so no matter what you're doing, and we see it in the corporate world, we see it everywhere. It's the message that I definitely get from you, and I think that this is such a nice boil down of a very complicated issue that is DEI into, do we make people feel welcome?
It's simple, right?
And I think, when it's interesting because when we are talking about diversity, we do have to look at the bigger picture. And it's like we have, visible diversity and we have invisible diversity. And are we taking into consideration all those things? I'm a recovering alcoholic and addict. I've been sober since I was 21. But
congratulations to that as well.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. But so many of our events and everything are built around alcohol, right? And for me, I don't really have a challenge with that. But what about people who do have a challenge with it, or they might be pregnant, or they might, for faith reasons, not interested in doing that? What do we do to include that, right? And so I think that there's a lot of different things, and it's important to look at these invisible diversities because, we can have a room full of all white men, and that room can still be very diverse. Mm-hmm. In an invisible diversity kind of way. And conversely, we can also have a room that looks very diverse, but is still exclusive. Mm-hmm. And that, I think, is a challenge that we sometimes run into when we're really focusing on let's get this type of person, let's get this type of person. That's not what we need to be doing. What we need to be doing is making sure that whoever comes in feels that this is the place they belong.
Well, I'm going to push back just a little bit, and I just want to know your perspective on this is, what do you say to people that are like, well, if you're, it's that whole thing, if I'm marketing to everybody, I'm marketing to nobody. What do you do with that feedback? If everybody's welcome and I have to I have to accommodate for every single person, how is that possible and how is that sustainable? Because you could just take the the example you gave about alcohol, okay? Like then you have a non-alcoholic thing, and then you have – and at what point does it become where – or does it become a point where it's unsustainable or it's unattainable?
I don't think it does. I think that I would respond to that with like, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you want to be as inclusive to people as possible? What's the drawback to being inclusive, to allowing people to feel that they're welcome in a space? And why would you not want that? And I've yet to hear a good reason why they don't. And I think that the one challenge that we sometimes are faced with is like, especially district governor-elects bring it up a lot. And it's like, oh, well, I have club presidents are worried that if we do this, we're going to lose members. Because, and I'm like, well, first of all, we don't know how many members we're losing because we're not doing this.
Yeah.
Right.
Fair enough.
Because we don't know when people come to a meeting and they never come back, why they didn't come back.
Right. There's no sort of exit interview.
Yeah. And I think that the other thing is Mark Wafer, who's Valerie Wafer. She's the chair of the task force. But I was having a conversation with Mark and we were talking about this. And he's like, we might lose members because of this conversation, but we're not going to lose Rotarians.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good.
That's so good.
That's so good.
And a perfect way for us to end on this section, and we'll roll into our next section. That was beautiful. Beautiful response to my husband there, Brian. I love it. It was really good. As a reminder, you are listening to Searching for Service. I'm Kelly Kirk.
And I'm Joseph Kirk.
We'll see you in a little bit.
Bye. Rotary is a place for all community-minded people who want to serve their areas with the support of an international organization. Join Rotary to find service. Join Rotary to find inclusion. Join Rotary to find leadership. Join Rotary to find fun. Join Rotary to find friendship. Join Rotary to find a better version of the world. Find a Rotary Club near you at Rotary.org and click on Club Finder. There is a club out there for everyone. Find your fit with Rotary. Rotary.org.
For decades, eradicating polio worldwide has been Rotary's cornerstone cause. We are incredibly close to ridding the globe of this virus, but we need everyone's help to get us to the goal. World Polio Day is October 24th. Please consider making a new donation to Polio Plus or increasing your already generous giving. Go to endpolio.org to be a part of this historical eradication of polio. You will help get vaccinations to the most remote parts of our world and help fulfill a promise we made to end polio now. 2 drops, and it stops.
Don't miss Leonard Skinner, Darius Rucker, REO Speedwagon, and Tyler Hubbard at Lakefront Music Fest, July 14th and 15th at Lakefront Park in Prior Lake. Leonard Skinner headlines July 14th with REO Speedwagon and Blackstone Cherry. Darius Rucker headlines July 15th with Tyler Hubbard of Florida Georgia Line and Joe Nichols. Tickets available at lakefrontmusicfest.com. That's lakefrontmusicfest.com. Produced by Prior Lake Rotary.
Riverbend Nature Center is a free, nonprofit natural habitat in Faribault, Minnesota, with 743 acres, the Straight River, and 10 miles of trails. Despite no public funding, it offers educational programs to almost 10,000 youth and families annually. Riverbend seeks your feedback on its new strategic plan at rbnc.org/strategic-planning by March 30th. Thank you for your time.
Hello and welcome back to Searching for Service, brought to you by Rotary District 5950 and 5960. You can find us on your favorite podcast platform. I'm Kelly Kirk.
And I'm Joseph Kirk. And we do love 5-star reviews, and we do love you as the viewer, too. So thank you so much for tuning in.
We switched it up a little bit there. We switched it up, and I love it. It was so good. As a reminder, we have Brian Rusch on with us right now, and we're getting into our favorite section. And that's just imagining what the future will look like for what it is that you do. But more specifically, just like for DEI, How do you envision that as a growing concept moving forward?
Well, I think that we're definitely seeing a movement. It started with I think it did start with a lot with clubs, but it also, and with the membership, but it also started with the directors and the board of directors for RI, and really wanting to let people know that this is something that we're doing. Rotary International, for a service organization, actually, as much as we like to make fun of the stale, male, and pale mythos of Rotarians,
I got to use that one.
There's definitely, we're way ahead of where most organizations of our size are in the DEI conversation.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that we should be very proud of. And I think that, President Holger had a lot to do with that. President Shaker carried that forward. President Jennifer has made DEI one of her cornerstones of her year. And to the point that actually the People of Action Awards this year are about inclusion and people of inclusion, and champions of inclusion is what they're calling it. And so I think that's one piece. I think that the second piece is that when we hired an outside firm to really look at the organization and what we could do, and overwhelmingly, the members want us to be talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and they want us to be evolving as an organization. And we need to evolve as an organization. That's the only way that we can grow. And I do think that we are, we were talking about this, kind of offline, but I think that there's definitely sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second.
It's okay. I have it happen too.
There's definitely, a people want to have these conversations, but they get a little nervous about it. And I think that the thing about it is that being curious about this conversation,
Yes.
That's what's important. That's really, we're not going to get this all right in the first try, but at least we're trying. And that's what's important. And that we're making an effort to really make a difference in this within the organization and within our society as a whole. I think that we go to I travel a lot, and I'm in a lot of different regions, and how, the DEI conversation in India is much different than the DEI conversation here in Spain, where I am, versus, in San Francisco, where I am usually. And so we have to make room for that conversation for all those conversations to come together. And ultimately, I think it does add to a better, stronger organization.
That's really well said. And I think also is we underestimate how important velocity is too, right? I mean, you think of where Rotary was, say, 30, 40 years ago, and you look at it, how it's changed how our culture and how our world has changed in, say, the last 15 to 20 years. Mm-hmm. And the velocity of change has increased. And one of the things that I always admire about Rotary, and yes, we have certainly opportunities to continue to grow and understand, is we do adopt things, and it's pretty nice to see that the velocity of that change is growing and growing, especially around cause-based clubs. I think that this is kind of and I'd love your opinion on kind of the future of what the cause-based clubs could look like. But I really do think that that's the thing that Rotary is figured out is, we don't have to meet in the conventional way. We can all believe in an ideal, or we want to serve, or we want to be a political action committee, whatever it needs to be. It's just as long as we can get a group of people that have the same ideals, and that group can be as diverse as any other, if not more, because I think that's where location sometimes gets us with the diversity component.
The cause-based clubs are an interesting thing for me, because when we chartered Castro, I'm so grateful that we did it. And, there's been 7 or 8 more that have chartered since then, and it's become more of a common thing. But it also had a feeling that it was a little bit separate but equal, right? And that we were kind of just putting people into this area. And I know in India they have a club that's all the members are transgender. And it was because they couldn't find another club that they could join. But the transgender women in that club do so much service and so much work, and they stand as a model. And so I think it's sort of a catch-22. Like at the end of the day, I think cause-based clubs are a good thing, because they really help to recognize that not everybody has to go into a lunch meeting, and sit and listen to a speaker every week. My club only does a speaker every 2 months, and it's a big speaker, and we invite everybody in the world to come to it. But on the flip side, there are people that want that traditional club and that traditional club experience, and that's awesome for them. And people thrive in that kind of atmosphere. And that we're not saying that you have to change, you have to stop doing this thing because of whatever. It's just like how can you, whatever type of club you have, whatever type of membership you're looking for, how can you just make that more inclusive at the end of the day?
So your perspective on this is, cause-based clubs are great, but having more inclusive clubs, no matter what they are, is really the direction of the future. So what does that look like? What does that ultimately look like for you?
We had this conversation in Houston and about not so much cause-based, but in Chicago there's an all-black club. And I was talking about the LGBT club and how I felt like there was a separate but equal thing to it. And my friend Osei stood up, and he's a past district governor from the Chicago area, and started talking about, like, if it weren't for this club that was all African American, he would not have gotten into Rotary. He wouldn't have felt like comfortable in anything, and he definitely wouldn't have felt that he could belong and thrive in this organization, where he ended up becoming the position of district governor and doing so much within the organization. And the organization's better because of people like him, as much as it is with all of us that are in the organization. So I think that we're going to see the evolution, and I think there's going to be bumps in the road, and there's going to be people that from time to time are not as supportive of it. But I think at the end of the day, we're seeing successes because of it. We're seeing that we're making a better organization. And I think that, when we started looking at bringing Rotaract into Rotary, and that I have a couple dual members in my club, and one of them is, she headed one of the MDIOs in Oceania, or the MDIO in Oceania. And in my conversations with her, in her region, Rotarians are constantly looking at Rotaractors as like these sort of second-class citizens, right? And they were offering her like to be an assistant to the assistant of the AG. And I'm like, no, you stand up. You have more knowledge about Rotary than most people I know. They make you full equal to everybody else, or else don't do it. And because if you do that, that's really setting yourself to be, that's what you're setting up for the people in the future to be. So we have to be really authentic as we approach this, and it's going to cause waves, And I have people sometimes that say like, oh, why are we having this conversation? Because it's making people uncomfortable. And the reality is, I've been in Rotary for 25 years now, right? And I have been uncomfortable a lot. And there's been times where I didn't feel comfortable bringing my husband to an event, or I didn't feel, that I would be welcome in that way if people knew. So if it's making people a little uncomfortable to have this conversation, I'm okay with that. Maybe it's time for people to be a little uncomfortable. Absolutely couldn't agree more, Brian. Great insight. This interview has been so amazing. We're going to just kind of do a little wrap up here. But thank you so much for being on and sharing your experience. You've got amazing experience. You do amazing things. For our listeners out there that want to find you, help them out, and where can they find you? You can find me all over the social media. Well, we found you on Instagram already. Yeah, my website is brianrusch.com. Also, check out the Rotary Club for Global Action. So that's Rotary. What is it? Oh gosh, RotaryGlobalAction.org. And yeah, that's through those you can reach me one way or the other, personally or through the club. Well, I am certain that you will, you'll end up having some individuals reach out to you. I might be one of them. So I do also want to say thank you very much. We know that you're traveling, and so to find time in the different time zones as well, it's greatly appreciated. Well, it's absolutely my pleasure. Thank you both for having me. Yeah, and I'd be remiss to not say Tom Gump says hello. Oh, that's right. Love it. Well, thank you again so much. And as a reminder, you are listening to Searching for Service. It's time to stop searching and start serving. Thanks, everybody.